Hello, and this isn't an N+1, this is a quick demo of some Fluent layout that I've done this morning. There is a library called serious.fluentlayouts.touch, which unfortunately is not working for me on Zoom. Oh, there it is. And it is available currently in the MVVM Cross Tutorials folder. So you can again see it's in GitHub/MVVM Cross Tutorials. It may move at some point somewhere else, but for now it's just there at serious.fluentlayout.touch. It's only available in iOS, and what it enables you to do is lay out your code, lay out your UI, using the iOS 6 and later constraints. So if we build this UI and run it at the moment, then what I've got at the moment is I've got a menu page, and then beyond that I have a number of views, most of which are already laid out, but the last of which, here it goes running. Oh, I've also got a slow simulator, which is a bit of a shame. But so I've got all of these pages, form, details, search, tips. Most of these are already laid out, so you can see, this is a form layout. We also have a stack panel inside a scroll view layout, so this scrolls. And we have a search, which is based on Frank's basic UI, so just two fields, very simple to understand. And then finally we have tip, and tip at the moment isn't laid out, so that's what I want to do in this video. And that's where we are. So let's go back to code, and let's just talk through how you can use this layout library. So tip view at the moment looks like this. It's a very standard MVVM cross UI. We create our text field, we create a seek bar, a seek label, a couple more labels, and then we set up the binding for all those. What's missing from what you normally see in the demos I do is normally you have all of these new rectangle F, and you have to work out the location of 10,10 and the width, etc. We're not using that today. What we're using instead is going to be this Fluent layout. And to do that, what you do is after you've done, well, you can do it wherever you want to, but after you've created your controls and after you've done your bindings, what you need to do is you need to get rid of all of the existing layout logic and constraint logic from your views. So to do that, what you do is if your big view, you call this method called, and I'm going to have to remember its name, so it's a translate or view dot not. The first thing you have to do is remember what it's called, and I'm going to look in another method to find this. So the very first thing I call here is this: subviews do not translate auto resizing mask container. So this is what I want to do. So it's subviews. It's because I don't have it in my namespace, that's why. Right, so the very first thing you do is you copy this existing thing. Subviews do not translate auto resizing masks into constraints, and this just wipes the existing functionality, the existing auto resizing mask into constraints. It just gets rid of it, and it's a very important line. If you miss this line, then you will be in trouble forevermore. And you can see it pulls in, as part of that, it pulls in the serious.fluentlayouts.touch in order to provide that extension method. So there it is. And actually what all that does under the cover is it calls on every single child label. It forces the do not translate. It calls this guy equals false. So this line here just iterates over all the subviews and calls translate auto resizing mask into constraints equals false. That is very techy. Just make sure you include that line and you'll be happy. Once you've done that, you can actually add some constraints. So what we're going to do is we're just going to try and add these. So we're going to call view add constraints, and then in the brackets, in the parentheses, we're going to create a number of constraints. So let's start at the top with subtotal. And what we'd like subtotal to do is we would like subtotal to sit on the left. So we're going to call at left of, and it's going to be at the left of our global view. And we'd like it to have a little margin in. Let's put it 10 in. Yeah, because that's a reasonable margin. So that's our first one done. What else would we like the subtotal? Well, let's say we'd also like the subtotal to be sitting at the top of our main view. And let's say that we'd like it to be, again, 10 in. That's a reasonable kind of margin in. And so what you can start to see is you've got a constant here, so let's just pull that out into a constant, or at least into a local variable. So this is going to be our margin, and our margin is going to equal to 10, just so we can use it as a constant. We could vary it, you know, a user could ask for a change in these things, but we're just going to use this margin. So that's the left and the top of our subtotal. We'd also like to set its width somehow, and to do that the easiest way is let's make it full width. So let's also do that it's going to sit at the right of the top view, and it's going to sit in margin. And that has now fully described the subtotal. Well, obviously, you know, it's going to have a height because it's going to have some text in it, but this as a whole has just described it so that, you know, we don't worry at this stage about height. If you did want to set its height as well, you could do that. Let's make sure I put a comma in because this is a list of things. So you could, if you wanted to, you know, say make sure that subtotal and let's set its height. And what you could do, for example, is you could say that its height should be greater than or equal to, and you know, let's say that this should be greater or equal to 3 times margin. We don't want it to be any smaller than 30 in this case. So you could leave that in as well if you wanted to. And that's the subtotal completely described, and you can see it's described in a Fluent way, and that the UI will adapt. So if you change, you know, from an iPad to an iPhone, it will make sure that all of these things you know, work out themselves if you change from portrait to landscape. So you've got at left of, at top of, at right of, and the height. That should fully describe its position. So underneath the subtotal we've got a seek. So let's do the seek. And let's say that it's left, so we would like to align it underneath the subtotal. So let's say, so let's use left, and let's do with same left, which is going to put it at the same left as the subtotal. So we're doing it underneath. And then let's also make sure it's underneath, so let's do seek dot below. And so there's a below extension method here. And so we're going to say we're going to put that underneath subtotal. And let's give it a margin underneath there of, again, we'll just use our constant of margin. And then let's make the seek bar sort of only fill, whatever, 2/3 of the screen. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a seek label on the right of the seek bar. So what we'll do is we'll seek dot, and we're going to make sure that the seek bar is to the left of the seek label. Yeah, and again we'll make sure there's a margin there so that they're separated. And what I said was it was going to be 2/3 of the width. So what you can do is you can do with relative width, and so this is going to have the relative width of the seek label, and actually let's make it 3/4, so it's going to be 3 times as big as the seek label, 3 times as wide as the seek label. And again, we could give it a height if we want. So I'm just going to remove that height line. It's not really needed for our demo here, so I'm going to remove it. So we've got our seek label set up. That's easy enough. And what we'd like, we've got our seek bar, but we'd like to have our seek label set up as well. So let's just set it up. So seek label, we already know it's left because it's kind of been defined by this. But let's give it its right. So let's give it at the right of its parent view, so it's the whole view. And in fact, what we could do is we could say, let's just align it with the same right as subtotal has got. So let's just do that, dot with right, with same right as subtotal. Oops, subtotal. So that's going to be its thing. We'd also like to make the seek label, we'd like to make it to line up at the same top as the seek bar, so with same top as the seek. And that, I think, is fully described the seek label, so that should work. And then we've got a tip label. So the tip label is going to sit underneath the seek currently. So let's just do below seek, and again put in a margin. And then the tip label we'd like to give its left, so with same left, the same as the seek. And we could leave its right, really, it doesn't really bother us, does it? But we may as well set it just to make sure that it completely describes it. So let's do tip label dot with same width, and we'll make it the whole width the same as the subtotal has. And that's the tip label fully described, so the only one left is the total label. And what we like is the total label, and you can see we're speeding up a bit now because we're getting more confident. It's going underneath the tip label by margin, and it's also going to go as a total label dot with same left as seek and the same width as the very first thing, subtotal. So I think that as a whole, this set of constraints that we've just created should describe a kind of UI that at least makes sense to a first description. So let's give that a go. If we just run it, hit F5, then hopefully this should look a bit better as a UI. So it's going to be up and running. The simulator is probably still going to animate a bit slow, but that's just the way it's feeling. It's a lovely hot day again here in London, so I don't blame it. And let's see. Okay, so it's slowly kicking into motion. It's a slowed down simulator. And then if we hit tip, then you can see here are this is our label that we've put in there to start with. And you know, we can change that and all the binding will come through. This is our seek bar, and hopefully you can kind of see that that has got 3 times the length of this little label here. These are our other 2 labels, and that layout was fully managed in code. If you didn't like that, then obviously we could go back and let's just say that actually this tip label and the total label, we kind of want them to share the same line. Then what you can do is you can go back to this code and you can say, right, well the total label, I'd now like it to be you know, with the same top as the tip label, please. You see there's no margin in there this time because it's going to be an exact number. And what we'd like to do, and I managed to mess up my commas, what we'd like to do is then the total label, we would like to put this to the right. So we're going to say to right of, and this is going to be the right of the tip label. Again, we'll make sure there's margin in there. And what we'll do is we'll say the tip label, we would like it to have the same width as the total label now. So we're just changing the way our UI controls interact, which should enable us to put these things. And we don't want this last with same left now. What we'd like is we'd like just to say the right of it, so with the same right as the let's put it the same as the very first thing, which was subtotal. So now we've rearranged our UI in code, and this should mean that the bottom things are going to be on the same line. Let's just see if that works. Obviously we might want to do some alignment as well within the controls, but I think overall that should just push it. And hopefully my simulator will drag itself onto a hot day life. Here it comes. And so what we now have is if you hit tip, you can see the bottom 2 are now on the same line. All the data binding still works. It's just the layout that we've actually changed. So, you know, if we then go up to this and start typing in these things, then all the data binding carries on working and the UI layout has been updated. So behind the scenes here, there are lots of Fluent APIs that have been exposed, but it's a very simple struct, if you like, that's at the root of it. And all it is that every single relationship involves a first view, a second view, the attribute on the first view, so whether it's left, right, top, bottom, the attribute on the second view, a multiplier which allows you to do those relatives, and a constant which allows you to do plus 10 or whatever for the margins. And that's all it is. And then a margin which is a relation which is less than or equal to, or greater than or equal to. And those are things. And the other views here that I haven't really shown you are, as well as this tip layout we just built, there's a simple search form, which is where we started, which is just a two layout control, and I can just quickly show you that. So the layout for this simple search view is that we have a button that's at the top with a little bit of vertical padding, a button that's at the right minus a little bit of horizontal padding. The width of the button is fixed, and the text which is alongside it is to the left of the overall view, to the left of the button, and has the same top as the button. So that's how that's laid out. If we go back and we see the next example, then we have a details page, and this details page was this scroll view. And the way the scroll view is created is actually created using a bit of reflection. So let me just find that. It's this details view. So it's created using a bit of reflection on all the properties in the view model, and it just goes round in a loop, and for every property in the view model it adds an intro label, a text field and a label. And then at the end what it does is it just creates one big stack panel, which is like a linear layout in Android or a stack panel in Xamarin. And that in itself, all that does really is says lay it out beneath the one as a full width item, lay it out as beneath the one before as a full width item. So you know, it's a handy little shortcut we've got there, a vertical stack panel. But if you want to do something more advanced, then the code for that is pretty simple. It may not feel it to start with, but it is. So what the code for a vertical stack panel is you've got kind of some margins passed in, but all it does is for every view in the list, so every subview currently, everything you pass in, it sets its left equal to the left of the parent view plus a little bit. It sets the width, let me just zoom in this a bit, it sets the width equal to the width of the parent view minus the two margins. If there is a previous item in the list, then it adds it to the bottom, otherwise it does it slightly differently to the top of the parent. Actually, it looks like there might be a minor bug there about which margin it's using, but that's fine. And then also we have if the parent is a UI scroll view at the very end, we also just set the bottom item just so the UI scroll view know how to resize. And that gives us this UI, which, you know, is pretty impressive for no layout code at all. Well, not pretty impressive, but it's pretty impressive in iOS, where we tend to write a lot of code. So that's the details view. We also here have this form view, which is kind of a bigger example of what we've already seen. So lots of individual controls laid out, and those layouts allow us to kind of do a 2/3 width and a 1/3 width and a 50/50 width, etc. So you can see how that's laid out from code, and it's pretty nifty as a way of going. Okay, and the other advantage of this as well, so this first page is also done, but the other advantage is if we do rotate left, then you'll see how all of our controls resize, including our form, including our details page. It still resizes beautifully, and that's because the constraints just kick in and resize things for us. So it's very handy. Whoops, my mouse is getting a life of its own. And also, you know, our tip form we've just built has just resized without us having to write any new code. If we also went up to iPad, let me just see if I can do this. Then when we go up to iPad, we should see the same sort of thing. So I believe this demo is this one. It's fixed as an iPhone, so it's not going to work anyway. But had we have done this as a universal, then this would also have scaled. Apologies that we didn't do it as a universal, so it's a failed demo. Okay, so that is the demo completed. As I say, there's no formal release of this library at the moment, so it's not, you know, in a NuGet package or whatever. But the code is pretty small, and you could pull it in yourself, or hopefully we might get a chance to do a formal release inside MVVM Cross at some point. But have a play, see what else you can build. You know, we build a stack panel. Can you build other things that are useful and exciting? So I hope that kind of makes sense to you, and that's the end of me talking to you. I'm going to go off for a bike ride. That is Fluent Layouts.